The credit card statement showed a charge for $347 at Romano's Steakhouse on Tuesday night. Nathan Cross stared at the paper in his calloused hands, engine grease still under his fingernails from another 12-hour day at the garage. He'd been home that Tuesday, eating leftover pizza and watching ESPN while Olivia claimed she was working late on parent-teacher conferences. But Romano's wasn't the kind of place you went alone, and $347 wasn't the kind of bill you ran up discussing troubled students. Nathan folded the statement carefully and placed it back in the stack of mail. His jaw worked silently as he processed this information the same way he diagnosed engine problems, methodically, without rushing to conclusions. After 19 years of marriage, he'd learned to trust evidence over emotions. Olivia's keys jingled at the front door. Nathan moved to the kitchen counter, spreading the bills out like he'd been paying them all along. She entered with that bright smile she'd perfected during her 15 years as Pine Ridge Elementary's vice principal, the one that made parents feel heard while she maneuvered them exactly where she wanted them. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, dropping her purse and kissing his cheek. Her perfume was different, something expensive and floral that definitely wasn't the drugstore body spray she usually wore. "How was your day at the shop?" "Fixed 3 transmissions and diagnosed a fuel pump. Mrs. Henderson's Honda is running like new." He gestured to the bills. Credit card statement came in. "Looks like you had dinner at Romano's this week." Olivia didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that. Sarah Patterson's daughter is having behavioral issues in class. Her mother insisted on taking me to dinner to discuss it privately. You know how these parents can be?" Nathan nodded, filing away the lie with the same precision he cataloged parts in his inventory system. Sarah Patterson drove a beat-up Toyota and worked 2 jobs to support her family. She wouldn't drop $347 on dinner if her life depended on it. "Must have been some conversation," he said mildly. "You have no idea. 3 hours of her crying about her divorce affecting little Emma's grades. I barely touched my food." Olivia moved to the refrigerator, her back to him. "I'm exhausted. I think I'll take a bath and go to bed early." Nathan watched her leave, noting the slight tremor in her hands as she grabbed a bottle of wine. In 19 years, he'd seen Olivia handle angry parents, hostile school board members, and budget crises without breaking a sweat. Whatever was making her nervous now had nothing to do with the Patterson family. He waited until he heard water running upstairs before pulling out his phone. A quick Google search confirmed what he already suspected. Romano's was booked solid on weeknights, requiring reservations weeks in advance. The kind of place Derek would choose to impress someone. Derek, his younger brother, who'd been calling the house more frequently in recent months. Derek, who'd always resented Nathan inheriting their father's land, when Nathan was the one who'd stayed to take care of the old man until he died. Nathan's military training had taught him patience. 12 years in Army intelligence before he came home to Pine Ridge had shown him that people revealed their secrets when they thought nobody was watching. He'd spent those years in places where assumptions got people ended, where the difference between truth and lies was measured in body counts. Now he applied those same skills to his marriage. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan began to pay attention, really pay attention. Olivia's phone, which used to sit casually on counters and tables, now stayed glued to her side. She took calls in the bathroom with the fan running. Her work schedule, previously predictable as sunrise, became erratic with late meetings and weekend conferences that somehow never appeared on the school district's public calendar. The real breakthrough came when he installed a security camera system at Cross Automotive. Officially, it was to prevent the break-ins that had been plaguing local businesses. Unofficially, it gave him a clear view of the parking lot where Olivia sometimes stopped by to bring him lunch. On a Thursday afternoon in October, Nathan watched the monitor from his office as Olivia's silver Accord pulled into the lot. She parked in her usual spot near the entrance, but instead of getting out, she sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes. Nathan was about to go check on her when Derek's black pickup truck appeared on screen. His brother parked 3 spaces away. Through the grainy footage, Nathan watched Derek walk to Olivia's car and get in the passenger seat. For 47 minutes, they talked with an intensity that looked nothing like casual family conversation. When Derek finally got out, he leaned back through the driver's window and kissed Nathan's wife. Not a brotherly peck on the cheek. A kiss that spoke of familiarity, of shared secrets, of promises made in darkness. Nathan saved the footage to 3 different drives and sent copies to an encrypted email account he'd maintained since his military days. Then he sat in his office chair, staring at the frozen image of his wife and brother, and began to plan. The first step was information gathering. Nathan had learned long ago that knowledge was the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal. He started with Derek's finances, using contacts from his army days to pull credit reports and banking information. What he found painted a picture of a man drowning in debt despite his claims of running a successful landscaping business. Derek owed money to suppliers, creditors, and worse, people who didn't believe in payment plans. Olivia's finances were more complex but equally revealing. The joint account she shared with Nathan showed regular transfers to a savings account he'd never known existed. Small amounts at first, $50 or $100, but growing larger over the past 6 months. The account now held nearly $15,000, money that should have been going toward their mortgage or the shop's expansion he'd been planning. But the real revelation came when Nathan accessed the property records for Riverside County. 3 weeks earlier, someone had filed a request to have Nathan declared mentally incompetent, citing his increasingly erratic behavior and inability to manage his financial affairs. The petition, signed by Olivia Cross and supported by a statement from Derek Cross, requested that Olivia be granted power of attorney over Nathan's assets, including the 47 acres of mountain property their father had left him. Nathan sat in the courthouse parking lot, reading the documents on his laptop screen. The petition painted him as a man spiraling into depression and paranoia, someone who'd been talking about enemies everywhere and making nonsensical accusations against family members. It included a statement from Dr. Amanda Foster, a psychiatrist Nathan had never met, evaluating his mental state based on family reports and recommending immediate intervention. The hearing was scheduled for November 15th, 3 weeks away. Nathan drove home in silence, his mind working through possibilities like a computer processing data. Olivia and Derek had been planning this for months, maybe longer. They'd been building a case, creating a paper trail, establishing a narrative that would let them steal everything he'd worked for. The affair was just the appetizer. The real meal was his inheritance, his business, his entire life. That night, Nathan made his first move in what would become a war of attrition. He started with Derek's weakness, his pride. Nathan knew his brother well enough to understand that Derek needed to feel superior, needed to believe he was the smartest person in any room. So Nathan began to play the role of the paranoid, unstable husband they were trying to create. At the hardware store where Derek sometimes grabbed coffee, Nathan made loud comments about feeling watched and followed. He complained to the clerk about phone calls in the middle of the night, about strange cars parked outside his house. He mentioned these things when he knew Derek's friends were around, when he knew word would get back to his brother. At the same time, Nathan began documenting everything. He installed recording equipment in his own home, hidden cameras that would capture any conversations between Olivia and Derek when they thought he wasn't around. He hired a private investigator from the next county over, a former cop named Simon Blake, who specialized in infidelity cases and insurance fraud. Simon's initial report confirmed what Nathan already suspected. Olivia and Derek had been meeting regularly for over 8 months, always in out-of-the-way locations, always careful to avoid being seen together in public. But they'd grown comfortable, sloppy. Simon had photographs of them together at a cabin Derek rented under a false name, receipts from romantic dinners charged to credit cards Olivia thought Nathan didn't know about. More importantly, Simon had discovered that Derek had been using Nathan's personal information to apply for loans and credit cards. Nathan's identity had been compromised in a dozen different ways, all building toward the moment when Derek would claim Nathan was too mentally unstable to notice or care. "Your brother's been busy?" Simon said during their meeting at a diner 40 miles outside Pine Ridge. "He's got everything set up to take over your finances the moment that court order goes through? Bank accounts already established, power of attorney documents ready to file. This isn't his first time running this kind of scam." Nathan looked up from the photographs spread across the table. "What do you mean?" "Derek Cross has been married twice before. Both wives died under suspicious circumstances. Both left him everything they owned. The first one, Rebecca Martinez, supposedly committed ending after losing her job. The second, Janet Reeves, died in a car accident on an icy road that hadn't been icy in 3 days." Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You think he ended them?" "I think your brother has a pattern of targeting vulnerable people and systematically destroying their ability to resist him. Your wife might think she's his partner, but based on his history, she's just another mark." That night, Nathan sat in his garage until 3 in the morning, staring at the surveillance footage of Olivia and Derek kissing in his parking lot. He understood now that this wasn't just about adultery or money. This was about survival. Derek had killed before, and he would do again if it meant getting what he wanted. Nathan had spent 12 years in military intelligence, but he'd never applied those skills to warfare on his own soil. Now he began to think like a soldier again, like someone whose life depended on outmaneuvering an enemy who had already proven willing to end. The plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to prove Derek and Olivia's guilt, Nathan would use their own weapons against them. If they wanted to portray him as mentally unstable, he would give them exactly what they were looking for, until the moment he revealed that he'd been recording everything. Nathan began phase 1 of his counterattack on a rainy Tuesday morning in early November. He called in sick to work, something he hadn't done in over 2 years, and spent the day at home acting increasingly agitated whenever Olivia was around. He muttered about phone calls that didn't exist, complained about neighbors spying on him, and made a show of checking locks and windows multiple times. When Olivia tried to comfort him, Nathan pulled away with suspicious looks. When she suggested he see a doctor, he accused her of trying to drug him. By evening, she was on the phone with Derek, whispering urgently in the bathroom while Nathan pretended to sleep. The next morning, Nathan escalated. He showed up at Derek's landscaping office, which turned out to be a rented storage unit behind a strip mall, and confronted his brother about following him around town. Derek, who had indeed been keeping tabs on Nathan's movements, played the concerned brother perfectly. "Nathan, you're scaring me," Derek said, his voice full of manufactured worry. "When's the last time you slept? You look terrible." "I sleep fine when people aren't breaking into my house," Nathan snapped. "I know it's you. I know you want the land. Dad never should have given it to me, right?" "That's what you think." Derek's eyes flashed with genuine emotion for just a moment. Greed, resentment, hatred, before the mask of concern slid back into place. "Nobody's breaking into your house. Nobody wants to hurt you. But this paranoia, these accusations, they're not normal, Nathan. Maybe you should talk to someone." "Like who? Dr. Foster?" Derek's surprise was genuine this time. "Who's Dr. Foster?" Nathan filed away that reaction. Derek hadn't been involved in creating the fake psychiatric evaluation. That was all Olivia's work. Interesting. Perhaps their partnership wasn't as complete as he'd assumed. "Never mind," Nathan muttered, backing toward his truck. "Just stay away from my wife." As he drove away, Nathan saw Derek pull out his phone, no doubt calling Olivia to report on their disturbed conversation. Perfect. Every interaction was being documented by the hidden recording devices Nathan had sewn into his jacket, every word captured for the eventual revelation that would destroy them both. Phase 2 began 3 days later when Nathan discovered that someone had been in his house while he was at work. Nothing was missing, but small things were out of place. Papers moved, drawers opened and closed just slightly off from how he'd left them. Olivia was searching for something. Probably the bank statements or property deeds that would give her more ammunition for the competency hearing. Nathan decided to give her what she was looking for. He created false documents suggesting he'd been hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there, making increasingly irrational decisions about his business. He left them in places where Olivia would find them during her searches. A doctor's appointment reminder for psychiatric evaluation tucked between insurance papers. A prescription bottle for anti-anxiety medication, actually vitamin supplements. Left. In his work truck, handwritten notes about people watching the house strategically placed in his desk drawer. Each piece of false evidence was designed to support the narrative Olivia and Derek were building, but each was also traceable back to its real source. The fake doctor's appointment was scheduled with a physician who didn't exist at a clinic that had been closed for 3 years. The prescription was written by a psychiatrist whose license had been revoked for fraud. The handwritten notes were created on paper Nathan had purchased specifically for this purpose, with receipts and credit card records proving when and where he'd bought them. Nathan was building a trap within a trap, letting Olivia and Derek think they were succeeding while documenting every step of their fraud. The breakthrough came on November 8th, exactly 1 week before the competency hearing. Nathan had installed motion-activated cameras throughout his house, devices so small they looked like decorative buttons or electrical outlets. When he reviewed the footage from his home office, he watched Olivia systematically photographing his financial records while talking on her phone. "No, I haven't found the property deed yet," she was saying. "He must keep it somewhere else." "What do you mean, what if he doesn't have it?" "Of course he has it. You can't own land without having the deed." "Yes, I understand the timeline. November 15th. I'll have everything we need by then." She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end of the call. Nathan enhanced the audio, but couldn't make out the other voice clearly. "Derek, calm down. I know what I'm doing." I've been planning this longer than you have. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's falling apart exactly like we hoped. Dr. Foster's report will be perfect evidence. I don't care what your previous wives thought about your methods. This is different. This is better. Nathan's blood went cold. Previous wives, plural. Simon Blake had been right about Derek's history, and now Nathan had proof that Olivia knew about it. She wasn't an innocent victim being manipulated by Derek. She was a full partner in whatever they had planned. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Olivia detailing her search of Nathan's financial records and discussing backup plans if the competency hearing didn't go as expected. Nathan saved every word to his encrypted files and began preparing for the final phase of his counterattack. On November 12th, 3 days before the hearing, Nathan made his move. He started by visiting Detective Jenna Ruiz at the Pine Ridge Police Department. Ruiz was a 10-year veteran who'd known Nathan since high school, someone he could trust to listen without immediately dismissing his claims as paranoid delusions. "Jenna, I need to report a conspiracy to commit fraud," Nathan said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Ruiz looked up from her paperwork with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Nathan looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, which wasn't far from the truth, but his voice was steady and his eyes were clear. "What kind of fraud, Nathan?" "Identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud, and potentially conspiracy to commit murder." He placed a flash drive on her desk. "Everything's on there. Audio recordings, video surveillance, financial records, forged documents. My wife and brother have been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can steal my inheritance." Ruiz picked up the flash drive, turning it over in her hands. "That's a serious accusation. You understand I'll have to investigate this thoroughly? I'm counting on it. But Jenna, there's something else. I have reason to believe Derek has done this before, to his previous wives, both of whom died under suspicious circumstances shortly after signing over their assets to him." Nathan spent the next 2 hours walking Ruiz through the evidence he'd collected. The fake psychiatric evaluation, the forged power of attorney documents, the secret bank accounts, the recorded conversations. By the time he finished, Ruiz was making notes and asking for copies of everything. "I'll need to verify all of this," she said. "If even half of what you're telling me is true, we're looking at multiple felonies." "But Nathan, why didn't you come to me sooner? Why let it get this far?" "Because I needed them to commit to the fraud completely. I needed evidence that would hold up in court, not just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. They had to believe they were winning right up until the moment they lost everything." Ruiz nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to be at the competency hearing on November 15th. I want you to see them perjure themselves in front of a judge before you arrest them. And I want you to be ready to investigate Derek's previous wives the moment this case breaks open. You want to let them continue with their plan, even knowing what they're capable of?" Nathan's smile was cold and empty. "I want them to hang themselves with their own rope. And I want everyone in Pine Ridge to see exactly who they really are." November 15th dawned gray and cold, with the promise of snow and the heavy clouds hanging over the mountains. Nathan dressed carefully in his best suit, the one he'd worn to his father's funeral, and drove to the courthouse with the calm precision of a soldier heading into battle. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in Judge Patricia Hawkins' courtroom. Nathan arrived early and sat in the back, watching as Olivia and Derek entered with their lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Richard Crenshaw, who specialized in family law and estate planning. Olivia looked perfect, as always, professional but concerned. The loving wife worried about her husband's deteriorating mental state. Derek played his role as the devoted brother, someone who'd tried to help but was now forced to take difficult action for Nathan's own good. Dr. Amanda Foster took the stand first, describing Nathan's alleged symptoms based on family reports and behavioral observations. She painted a picture of a man suffering from paranoid delusions, someone who'd been making increasingly irrational decisions and needed immediate intervention. Nathan listened to her testimony without emotion, knowing that every word was being recorded and that Dr. Foster's fraudulent credentials would be exposed within hours of her stepping down from the witness stand. Derek testified next, describing Nathan's erratic behavior and nonsensical accusations. He spoke about Nathan's claims of being followed, his suspicions about family members, his inability to manage his business properly. Derek's performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with choked-up moments where he had to pause and collect himself. "I love my brother," Derek said, looking directly at the judge. "But I can't stand by and watch him destroy his life. He needs help, and sometimes getting help means making hard decisions." Finally, Olivia took the stand. She described Nathan's increasing paranoia, his accusations about their marriage, his violent outbursts and threatening behavior. She produced the fake evidence Nathan had planted, the prescription bottles and doctor's appointments, and handwritten notes about surveillance. "I'm afraid of what he might do," she said, tears streaming down her face. "To himself or to others. I just want him to get the help he needs before something terrible happens." Judge Hawkins listened to all the testimony, reviewed the evidence, and appeared ready to grant the petition for guardianship when Nathan's lawyer stood up. Attorney Sarah Kim was a former prosecutor who specialized in fraud cases, someone Nathan had hired specifically for this moment. "Your Honor, before you make your ruling, I'd like to present evidence that this entire proceeding is based on forged documents and perjured testimony." The courtroom erupted. Crenshaw objected vehemently, claiming this was a desperate attempt to derail legitimate concerns about Nathan's mental health. But Judge Hawkins was intrigued enough to allow Kim to present her evidence. What followed was a systematic destruction of every piece of testimony that had been presented. Kim played audio recordings of Olivia and Derek planning the fraud, video surveillance of them meeting in secret, bank records showing the movement of money from joint accounts to secret accounts, and documentation proving that Dr. Foster's credentials were fake. The fake prescription was revealed to be vitamins. The non-existent doctor's appointment was exposed as a fabrication. The handwritten notes about surveillance were shown to have been created by Nathan himself as part of a counterintelligence operation. But the most damaging evidence came when Kim called Detective Ruiz to the stand and presented evidence linking Derek to the suspicious deaths of his previous wives. "Your Honor," Kim said, "this case isn't about a man having a mental health crisis. It's about a predator who was killed before and was planning to do it again, using his victim's own wife as an accomplice." By the time Kim finished presenting her evidence, Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Olivia sat frozen in her chair, her perfect mask finally slipping to reveal the calculating woman underneath. Crenshaw was frantically whispering to his clients, no doubt advising them to invoke their Fifth Amendment rights. Judge Hawkins denied the guardianship petition and ordered the case forwarded to the district attorney for criminal investigation. As court officers moved to take Derek and Olivia into custody, Nathan finally allowed himself to feel something other than cold calculation. He felt satisfied, but Nathan's revenge was far from over. The legal system would handle the criminal charges, but there were other scores to settle. Other people who had enabled or ignored what was happening while he was being systematically destroyed. The first target was Richard Crenshaw, the lawyer who had knowingly filed fraudulent documents with the court. Nathan had recorded every conversation Crenshaw had with Olivia and Derek, capturing clear evidence that the attorney knew he was participating in a fraud scheme. Nathan released those recordings to the State Bar Association, along with documentation showing that Crenshaw had handled the estate planning for Derek's previous wives. Within a week, Crenshaw's law license was suspended and he was facing criminal charges of his own. Dr. Amanda Foster proved even easier to destroy. Nathan's investigation revealed that she wasn't licensed in any state and had been operating under a stolen identity. The real Dr. Foster had died 3 years earlier in a car accident. The woman who had testified about Nathan's mental state was actually Derek's former girlfriend, someone with basic psychology training who had been paid to play a role. When the truth came out, it sparked a broader investigation into fraudulent psychiatric evaluations in guardianship cases. The fake Dr. Foster was arrested and charged with identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Her arrest led to the dismissal of dozens of other guardianship cases where she had provided similar testimony. But Nathan's most personal revenge was reserved for the people who had known what was happening and chosen to look the other way. Pine Ridge was a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Nathan began to understand that several people had suspected something was wrong, but had chosen not to get involved. Some had even profited from their silence. There was Tom Bradley, who owned the cabin rental business where Derek and Olivia had been meeting. Bradley had to have known he was renting to people using false names and paying in cash, but he'd looked the other way because it was easy money. Nathan made sure the IRS learned about Bradley's unreported cash income. He also provided evidence to the county health department about the unsafe conditions at several of Bradley's rental properties. Within 2 months, Bradley's business was shut down and he was facing federal tax evasion charges. Sarah Patterson, the parent whose supposed dinner request had been Olivia's alibi for the Romano's charge, had actually been paid to corroborate the story if anyone asked. Nathan made sure the school district learned about Patterson's arrangement with Olivia, leading to Patterson being banned from school grounds and losing custody of her daughter due to her involvement in a fraud scheme. Even Nathan's former friends found themselves facing consequences for their willingness to believe lies about his mental state, without ever trying to help him or verify what they were being told. Mike Henderson, who had been Nathan's closest friend since high school, had actively spread rumors about Nathan's breakdown after Derek fed him false information. When Nathan confronted Mike at the garage where they'd worked on cars together for 20 years, the conversation didn't go well. "You should have come to me," Mike said, looking uncomfortable as Nathan showed him the evidence of Derek and Olivia's conspiracy. "If you'd just told me what was really happening, I shouldn't have had to tell you anything," Nathan interrupted. "You've known me for 30 years. You know I don't have mental health problems. You know I don't make wild accusations without evidence. But the moment someone told you I was having a breakdown, you believed it without question. Derek was convincing. He seemed really worried about you." "Derek was setting me up to be murdered, Mike, just like he did to his previous wives. And you helped him do it by spreading his lies around town." Mike tried to defend himself, but Nathan had already heard enough. He ended their friendship that day and made sure everyone in Pine Ridge knew exactly what role Mike had played in the conspiracy. By January, Nathan had systematically destroyed everyone who had participated in or enabled the plot against him. Derek was in prison awaiting trial for the endings of his previous wives. Olivia was facing multiple felony charges and had lost her job, her reputation, and her freedom. The various accomplices and enablers were dealing with their own legal and financial problems. But Nathan wasn't finished. He had one final act of revenge that would ensure no one in Pine Ridge ever forgot what had happened. Nathan decided to leave Pine Ridge, but not quietly. He organized a public auction of all his assets: the garage, the house, the 47 acres of mountain property that had started everything. But instead of selling to the highest bidder, Nathan donated the proceeds to a foundation he created for victims of guardianship fraud. The auction drew huge crowds, including reporters from regional newspapers and television stations who had been following the story of the Pine Ridge conspiracy. Nathan used the media attention to tell his story in detail, describing how a network of corrupt individuals had nearly succeeded in stealing his life. "This isn't just about me," Nathan told the assembled crowd. "This is about a system that allows predators to operate by exploiting people's willingness to believe lies rather than ask hard questions. Derek Cross didn't succeed because he was smart or careful. He succeeded because people chose not to see what was right in front of them." Nathan sold everything he owned in Pine Ridge and moved to Seattle, where he used his military background to start a security consulting business specializing in fraud prevention. But he kept a detailed archive of everything that had happened, turning his experience into a cautionary tale he shared with law enforcement agencies and elder care organizations across the country. The Pine Ridge case became a model for how guardianship fraud operates and how it can be prevented. Derek's conviction for the endings of his previous wives led to renewed investigations of suspicious deaths in guardianship cases nationwide. Dozens of other predators were caught and prosecuted as a result of the attention Nathan's case brought to the issue. 3 years after the courtroom confrontation that had ended his old life, Nathan received a letter forwarded from his old address in Pine Ridge. It was from Olivia, written from the women's prison where she was serving a 15-year sentence for fraud and conspiracy. The letter was full of self-pity and blame-shifting. Olivia claimed she had been manipulated by Derek, that she had never intended for anyone to get hurt, that she had loved Nathan despite everything. She begged for forgiveness and asked Nathan to visit her in prison. Nathan read the letter once, then fed it into his shredder. Some things didn't deserve the dignity of a response. On a cold February morning, exactly 4 years after he'd first seen that credit card statement from Romano's Steakhouse, Nathan stood in his Seattle office looking out at Elliott Bay. His phone rang, a potential client calling about a suspected embezzlement case. "Cross Security Consulting," Nathan answered. "How can I help you?" As he listened to another story of betrayal and financial manipulation, Nathan felt the familiar satisfaction of being on the right side of a fight. He'd learned that the best revenge wasn't getting even. It was making sure the same thing never happened to anyone else. Derek Cross died in prison 2 months later, killed by another inmate who had lost his grandmother to a guardianship scam. Nathan read about it in the Seattle Times and felt nothing at all. Olivia was released early for good behavior after serving 9 years of her sentence. She tried to contact Nathan through social media, through mutual acquaintances, through letters sent to his business address. Nathan ignored all of her attempts at communication. The last Nathan heard, Olivia was living in a trailer park outside Spokane, working nights at a convenience store and trying to rebuild some kind of life from the wreckage of her choices. She'd lost everything: her career, her reputation, her freedom, her future. She would spend the rest of her life as a convicted felon, forever marked by her participation in a conspiracy that had nearly succeeded in destroying an innocent man. Nathan never spoke to her again. He didn't need to. The justice system had handled the punishment, and time had handled the rest. Olivia would live with the consequences of her choices every day for the rest of her life, just as Nathan lived with the consequences of his decision to fight back instead of becoming another victim. On quiet evenings in his Seattle apartment, Nathan sometimes thought about the man he'd been before he found that credit card statement. That man had trusted easily, loved unconditionally, and believed that good people didn't have to constantly watch their backs. That man passed away, killed as surely as if Derek had succeeded in his original plan. In his place was someone harder, more careful, more aware of how quickly trust could be weaponized against the trusting. Nathan didn't mourn that loss. The man he'd become had saved his own life and the lives of countless others who might have fallen victim to similar schemes. He'd turned his personal nightmare into a force for justice, using his pain to prevent others from experiencing the same betrayal. Sometimes justice looked like a courtroom conviction. Sometimes it looked like a life sentence in federal prison, and sometimes it looked like a man walking away from his old life and using his experience to make sure no one else would ever have to endure what he'd endured. Detective Jenna Ruiz visited Nathan in Seattle 5 years after the trial. She was working on a book about guardianship fraud and wanted to interview him about his experience. They met at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market, two middle-aged people who had seen enough of human nature to understand that evil often wore familiar faces. "Do you ever regret how you handled it?" Ruiz asked. "The way you let them think they were winning while you gathered evidence?" Nathan considered the question while watching tourists browse the market stalls outside the window. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that people I trusted were capable of planning my ending. But I don't regret fighting back. Some people think you went too far, destroying everyone who was connected to the conspiracy, even the people who were just peripherally involved. Those people attempted to do it by choosing willful ignorance over uncomfortable truth. They don't get to claim innocence because they didn't pull the trigger themselves." Ruiz nodded, making notes in her reporter's notebook. "What would you tell someone who found themselves in a similar situation?" "Document everything. Trust no one. And remember that sometimes the only difference between justice and revenge is who's telling the story." After Ruiz left, Nathan walked back to his office and spent the afternoon reviewing case files for his security consulting business. Each case was a puzzle to be solved, a wrong to be righted, a predator to be exposed. He'd found his calling in the wreckage of his old life, and he was good at it. As evening fell over Seattle, Nathan locked up his office and walked home through the city streets. He'd built a new life from nothing, created meaning from trauma, turned his personal hell into a career helping others avoid similar fates. He thought about Derek, dead in a prison cell. He thought about Olivia, working nights in a convenience store, forever marked by her choices. He thought about all the enablers and accomplices who had faced their own reckonings. Nathan felt no satisfaction in their suffering, but he felt no regret either. Justice wasn't always clean or comfortable, but it was necessary, and sometimes the only person who could deliver justice was the victim who refused to stay a victim. The light was fading as Nathan reached his apartment building. Another day was ending, another step further from the man he'd been and deeper into the man he'd chosen to become. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new victims who needed help, new predators who needed stopping. Nathan Cross unlocked his door and stepped into his new life, leaving the ghosts of Pine Ridge behind him where they belonged, in the past where justice had finally caught up with them all.